In the world of live television, anything can happen. But when Elon Musk steps onto the stage, it's always a spectacle. This time, it's not just about his usual tech talk or space exploration updates. No, today, it's personal. Trevor Noah, the host of one of the most influential late-night talk shows, has no idea what's coming. What happens when Musk, the tech mogul with a reputation for shaking things up, decides to drop a bombshell live on TV? You won't believe what he says, and you certainly won't believe how Trevor Noah reacts. Get ready for an explosive moment that no one saw coming. Make sure to like and subscribe to catch all the latest drama, and let us know what you think in the comments below. Now let's dive in. The stage was set, and the lights were brighter than ever. Trevor Noah, the charismatic host of The Daily Show, was sitting behind his desk, preparing for another night of political satire and cultural commentary. The audience was buzzing, eagerly anticipating the interview with none other than Elon Musk. Musk, a man whose name had become synonymous with innovation, revolution, and controversy, was set to appear on the show. But no one could have predicted what would unfold during this live TV moment. As the cameras rolled and the show began, Trevor greeted Elon with his usual charm. "Elon, it's great to have you here. Always a pleasure." The audience applauded, and Musk flashed his trademark grin. But there was an air of tension in the room, something unspoken, like a storm about to break. Elon, ever the enigmatic figure, sat down with ease. "Good to be here, Trevor," he said, his voice calm but with a sharp edge beneath it. "It's not every day I get to spend time with someone who talks more about Mars than I do." Trevor laughed, making a joke about Musk's love for space exploration, and the audience responded with their usual energy. It all seemed normal, light-hearted, until the conversation shifted. "Elon," Trevor began, trying to maintain his usual, friendly tone, "we all know you're a big fan of pushing the limits, whether it's with Tesla, SpaceX, or Twitter. But let's talk about the recent decisions you've made, particularly about how you've handled certain controversies. Some people would say you're all about creating chaos, just for the sake of it. What's your response to that?" The audience went silent, waiting for Musk's reaction. Trevor was no stranger to asking tough questions, but this one felt different. Was he genuinely curious, or was he setting Musk up for something more? Musk leaned forward, a flicker of something darker passing across his face. "I think what people misunderstand is that I'm not trying to create chaos. I'm trying to create change," he said, his words deliberate. "I disrupt industries, sure, but that's how progress happens. But there's one thing that really frustrates me, Trevor, and I think it's time we talk about it." Trevor raised an eyebrow, sensing that something was coming. "What's that?" he asked, trying to keep the mood light, though his curiosity was piqued. Musk's expression shifted. "This wasn't a joke. I've been watching how people like you, the ones who claim to have all the answers, have been so quick to criticize without understanding the bigger picture. You see, you mock the disruptors. You ridicule the ones who are actually trying to make a difference." Trevor's smile faltered slightly. "I wouldn't say that's true, Elon. I'm all for change, but it's about the way you go about it." Musk shook his head. "No, Trevor. I don't think you understand. It's easy for someone like you, sitting in a cozy studio, to throw stones at the ones in the arena. But I've been in the trenches, making decisions that aren't always popular. People like you have no idea what it's like to make those calls, to push the boundaries." There it was. Musk had just thrown down a challenge. The audience sat at the edge of their seats, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Trevor had always prided himself on being the witty, in-control host, but now it felt like he was being called out. Okay, Trevor responded, his voice tightening slightly, though he tried to laugh it off. "So you think I'm out of touch? I get it, Elon, but don't forget, you're not the only one out there disrupting things. We all have our roles to play." Musk's gaze sharpened, and for a moment the studio felt colder. Maybe it's time. You recognize that your role isn't just to comment from the sidelines, Trevor. Maybe it's time you realize that some of us are willing to risk everything for change, even if that means being misunderstood. The words landed like a bombshell, and the tension was thick in the air. Trevor's usual quick wit seemed momentarily lost as he tried to process the magnitude of Musk's statement. Was he being insulted, or was this some new game Musk was playing? Either way, it was clear that things had just taken a turn. But what was even more shocking was how the audience reacted. There were murmurs of approval from some quarters, while others seemed stunned into silence. This wasn't the light-hearted conversation they had expected. This was something deeper, more confrontational. The lines between the host and the guest had blurred, and what was supposed to be an entertaining segment had suddenly become a battle of ideologies. What was Musk really saying here? Was he questioning Trevor's role in the media? Or was there something more personal lurking beneath the surface? And more importantly, how would Trevor respond? One thing was clear. This was no ordinary TV interview. The silence that followed Musk's biting words felt like an eternity. Trevor Noah sat at his desk, visibly processing what had just happened. His usual confidence was beginning to crack. The audience, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, waited, with bated breath. Was this still the same friendly conversation, or had it turned into something more personal, more pointed? Trevor cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the narrative. "I think you're missing my point here, Elon," he said, his voice slightly sharper than before. "It's not about being misunderstood. It's about being accountable for the decisions you make. You can't just bulldoze your way through things and expect everyone to applaud. There's a responsibility that comes with the power you hold." Musk, however, wasn't backing down. He leaned back in his chair, his posture casual but his eyes locked on Trevor. "Accountability," he repeated slowly, almost mockingly. "That's rich coming from someone who profits off chaos, who thrives on stirring up drama. Let's not forget, Trevor, the media loves controversy, loves picking apart the flaws of others. It's what keeps the lights on, right?" Trevor's face tightened. He had been in the media world long enough to know when a shot had been fired, and this one had landed squarely. Musk wasn't just talking about his companies or his decisions. He was calling out the entire industry, the one Trevor was a part of. "I don't think you understand what it's like to stand in front of an audience and have to make decisions that affect real people, Elon," Trevor said, his voice gaining momentum. "You can't just say you're doing things for the greater good and expect everyone to fall in line. People get hurt, and that's where you've failed. To acknowledge the human cost of your actions." Musk's expression hardened, his calm exterior slipping just enough to show the intensity beneath. "You're too wrapped up in your own narrative, Trevor," he replied coolly. "You talk about the human cost, but what about the human cost of standing still? Of letting things remain the same because it's easier to follow the crowd than to break the mold? You want to talk about consequences? Let me remind you that every time someone does something that challenges the status quo, they face backlash. People like you who sit back and judge are part of the problem." The words stung, but Trevor wasn't about to let Musk get the last word. "Oh, I get it now," he said, leaning forward slightly. "You think you're some sort of hero, right? The lone wolf fighting against the establishment? But what happens when that wolf goes too far? What happens when your disruption leads to chaos instead of progress?" There it was, the real question hanging in the air. Was Musk truly trying to change the world, or was he just another billionaire playing with power, making decisions that suited his own vision without regard for the consequences? Musk's eyes narrowed, and for the first time there was a flicker of something more than just a business mogul in front of the camera. There was a man who believed in his own righteousness, who saw himself as a pioneer. "I don't need your approval, Trevor," Musk said, his tone still calm but with an underlying steeliness. "And I don't need to explain myself to anyone. But If you want to talk about heroes, look around you. The world is filled with people too afraid to take risks. I'm not afraid to fail. I'm not afraid to get things wrong, because at least I'm trying. What's your excuse? Trevor stood momentarily frozen, his mind racing. Was this the moment he had been dreading? The moment where his own ideals and the ideals of his guest collided in a way that was impossible to ignore? Musk wasn't just challenging him as a host, he was challenging him as a person. It was no longer just an interview. It was a confrontation. For a moment, Trevor didn't know how to respond. The studio, usually filled with laughter and applause, was eerily quiet. The audience could sense the tension building, and it felt as though the next few words spoken would define not just this segment, but the entire evening. But then Musk leaned in, his voice lowering, almost conspiratorially. "Let's cut through the BS, Trevor. You know the real reason why you can't handle what I'm doing. You've spent your whole career talking about the flaws in others, but what happens when someone flips the script? When the person you've been mocking turns out to be right all along?" Trevor's heart skipped a beat. The room seemed to close in on him. Was he really questioning his entire career? Was this how it felt to be exposed in front of millions of viewers? To have your own principles laid bare and dissected by someone who didn't care about the norms? "Maybe it's time to wake up, Trevor," Musk continued, his voice quiet but cutting. "You've spent all this time trying to entertain people, but in the end, are you really making a difference? Are you doing anything more than just feeding the cycle?" The words hung in the air, a challenge, an accusation. And for the first time in a long while, Trevor Noah wasn't sure how to respond. The tension between them was palpable, and the studio audience, usually quick to react with laughter or applause, was strangely quiet. It was as if everyone had collectively held their breath, waiting for Trevor to respond, waiting for the next move in this intellectual sparring match. Trevor Noah, the usually confident, sharp-witted host, was suddenly put in a position where he had to defend not just his profession, but his very approach to the world. He exhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing as he processed Elon Musk's words. How had this conversation gone from a light-hearted interview to an intense confrontation? Musk wasn't just challenging his career. He was challenging his entire philosophy. And there, in the middle of this moment, Trevor realized something he hadn't fully grasped before. Musk's approach wasn't about making people like him. It wasn't about crafting a polished image for the public to adore. No, Musk thrived on disruption, on testing the limits of what was acceptable, what was possible. It wasn't about fame or even fortune for him. It was about something deeper, something that Trevor, for all his career in the spotlight, had never truly been forced to confront. "Look, I get what you're saying," Trevor finally said, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. "You want to change the world, you want to shake things up. But that's not the problem. The problem is that you're too willing to bulldoze over everything in your path to get to your vision. And who pays the price for that? The people who don't have the privilege to just move on to the next thing." Musk raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "Is that what you really think, Trevor?" he asked, his voice surprisingly calm. "That I'm just bulldozing my way through life? That I'm too selfish to care about the consequences?" Trevor shook his head, his words coming out more forcefully now. "You may not see it, but that's exactly what it looks like to me. You've built an empire by doing what others were too afraid to do, sure. But what happens when the people you're stepping on get tired of it? What happens when you go too far, and suddenly the backlash is something you can't ignore?" There was a flicker of something, perhaps a hint of recognition, in Musk's eyes. For just a moment it seemed like Trevor's words had hit a nerve. But then, as quickly as it appeared, the moment was gone. Musk leaned forward slightly as though readying himself for the next round of this intellectual battle. "People have always been afraid of change, Trevor," Musk said, his voice growing more intense. "They said the same things when I started PayPal, when I built Tesla, when I made the leap into space. The same doubts, the same fears, the same criticism. But what you fail to see is that change doesn't happen without shaking things up. And sometimes, in order to do that, you need to step on a few toes. You need to push people out of their comfort zones. Trevor's mind was racing. It was clear that Musk had no intention of backing down. But was he wrong? Was Trevor simply too entrenched in the world of entertainment and safe debates to understand the kind of risk Musk was talking about? Was he too much of a product of the very media system Musk was calling out to be able to recognize the importance of pushing boundaries, no matter the cost? "You're right about one thing, Elon," Trevor said slowly, his tone changing. "Change does come with a price, but sometimes that price is more than you're willing to pay. Sometimes the people who are left behind in your wake aren't just statistics. They're human beings with lives, families, and dreams. And if you can't see that, then you've lost touch with what really matters." For a moment Musk was silent, his face unreadable. He wasn't angry, but there was a visible shift in his demeanor. Trevor could see it now. The faintest crack in the facade that Musk had so carefully constructed. Was he questioning himself, or was he merely sizing Trevor up, deciding whether this conversation was worth his time? Finally, Musk spoke, his voice quieter than before, but still carrying the weight of someone who was used to getting what they wanted. "I didn't get to where I am by listening to people who are comfortable," he said. "I got here by taking risks, by doing what no one else had the guts to do. You can keep making jokes and critiquing my every move, Trevor, but in the end, I'm the one changing the world." Trevor stared at him, and for the first time that evening, he saw something that made him pause. There was a conviction in Musk's voice, a certainty that Trevor couldn't deny. But that didn't mean he agreed with him. "Maybe that's your version of changing the world, Elon," Trevor said quietly. "But it's not the only one. The world doesn't just need change, it needs compassion. And sometimes, the most disruptive thing you can do is listen. Listen to the people who aren't in the room with you, the ones who don't have the platform to voice their concerns. That's real power. Not the power to shake things up for the sake of it, but the power to change things in a way that lifts everyone up." Musk's expression remained neutral, but the air between them was charged with an energy neither of them could ignore. This conversation was no longer about entertainment or the usual political banter. It had become a battle of ideologies, one that would resonate far beyond the studio walls. The audience was silent, absorbed in the back and forth unfolding before them. Trevor Noah and Elon Musk, two of the most influential figures of the moment, had taken the debate to a level no one expected. The tension in the room had reached a fever pitch. It was more than just a clash of personalities, it was a collision of worldviews. And now, it felt like something was about to break. Trevor had made his point. He had confronted Elon with the truth that sometimes change wasn't enough. That change had to be accompanied by empathy, by understanding, by considering the impact on people outside the echo chambers of the rich and powerful. But Elon wasn't backing down. His grip on the conversation was firm, even if his words were becoming less certain. "Do you really believe that, Trevor?" Elon asked, his voice tinged with a sharp edge that suggested he was starting to lose patience. "That what I'm doing doesn't lift people up? That it's all just selfish ambition?" Trevor didn't hesitate. "I believe that your vision is incredibly narrow, Elon," he shot back, his tone steady. "You see the world in terms of innovation and profit. And sure, that works for a lot of people who already have resources. But there's a whole other world out there, one where innovation doesn't come with a safety net, where people are left to pick up the pieces of whatever disruption you've caused." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. It was clear that they weren't just watching an interview anymore, they were witnessing a moment of reckoning. Elon's eyes narrowed, but his posture remained composed. "And what exactly do you want me to do about it, Trevor?" he asked, the challenge evident in his voice. "Should I stop innovating? Stop pushing the limits? Is that your solution?" Because let me tell you, if I did that, we wouldn't have any progress. There would be no SpaceX, no electric cars, no advancements in AI. Sometimes you have to take risks. You have to make sacrifices. Trevor leaned forward slightly, his hands clasped in front of him. Sacrifices? He repeated, his voice thick with disbelief. Who are you sacrificing, Elon? Because it's not you. It's not your bottom line. It's the people who can't afford to live in your world of endless innovation and disruption. It's the workers who get left behind when companies are too eager to adopt your ideas without thinking about the consequences. A murmur rippled through the audience. The truth had landed. The question now was whether Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur with an ironclad belief in his mission, could respond without further alienating the crowd. For a brief moment, Elon was quiet. His eyes drifted to the audience, as if searching for their reaction. He had come to this interview ready for anything, ready to face the questions, ready to defend his vision. But this wasn't what he had expected. He had underestimated Trevor. He had underestimated how deeply Trevor understood the struggles of those who weren't living in the rarefied air of billionaires and celebrities. It wasn't just about being right anymore. It was about whether Elon Musk could truly reconcile his drive for innovation with the need for compassion in a world that was growing more divided by the day. Finally, Musk spoke again, his voice softer than before. I don't know if you understand what it's like, Trevor, he said, almost as if to himself. When you've risked everything, your money, your time, your reputation, and still face the constant doubt from everyone around you, it's hard to think about anything else. You get focused on the goal, on the mission, and everything else fades into the background. Trevor didn't flinch. He'd heard it before, from countless people who had pursued success at any cost. But this time, it felt different. There was something vulnerable in Musk's voice that Trevor hadn't expected. And despite everything, he couldn't ignore it. I get it, Elon, Trevor replied quietly. I do. But it's not just about what you've sacrificed. It's about what we all have to give up in the process. The people who don't get a voice in this conversation. The ones who are just trying to get by while you're up there, making decisions that affect their lives without even realizing it. There was a long pause. The studio was still, as if everyone present was waiting for the next bombshell to drop, for the moment that would shatter the tension. But in that silence, something shifted. Elon's expression softened slightly, and Trevor could see that he wasn't just defending himself anymore. He was trying to understand. The conversation had gone from a clash of egos to something far more significant. For the first time in this interview, Elon Musk wasn't just a billionaire arguing for the future. He was a man grappling with the moral weight of his actions. The air in the studio was thick with anticipation. Trevor Noah and Elon Musk had just gone toe-to-toe, each pushing the other to their limits. But now, in the final moments of their interview, there was a shift, a subtle, almost imperceptible change. The crowd had been on the edge of their seats for what felt like hours, but now they were on the verge of witnessing something far more profound than just an exchange of words. It was a moment of reckoning. Elon sat back in his chair, his gaze still fixed on Trevor. For the first time in their conversation, he looked uncertain. The usual confidence that had carried him through years of public scrutiny seemed to waver just for a moment. Trevor, sensing the shift, chose not to press him further. Instead, he leaned in slightly, his voice calm but firm. "You're right, Elon," Trevor said, his words measured. "You've risked everything, and maybe you've had to shut out the world in order to push forward. But there's a price to that, isn't there? The more you silence the people around you, the more you become disconnected from the reality they're living in. And that's where your vision gets distorted. It's not that you lack ambition, it's that you've forgotten that ambition needs to be tempered with empathy." The silence that followed Trevor's words was deafening. Elon didn't speak immediately. His mind was racing, processing what had just been said. Trevor had been clear, direct, and even compassionate in his delivery. And now, for the first time in their conversation, Elon was forced to consider whether he had truly lost sight of something fundamental, the need to understand the world beyond his own. "I suppose I've never really considered it that way," Elon said after a long pause. His voice was quieter than before. The sharp edges that had defined much of the conversation now softened. "Maybe in my drive to build something bigger than myself, I've ignored the cost of that vision. I've been so focused on the future that I haven't stopped to think about the present, the people who are directly affected by the changes I'm pushing." Trevor nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's easy to get caught up in the future, especially when you have the kind of power that you do. But that power means something. It's not just about getting what you want, it's about what you can give back to the world. And sometimes, giving back isn't just about creating the next big thing. Sometimes, it's about recognizing that the people around you are just as important as the mission you're chasing." Elon looked down for a moment as though weighing Trevor's words against everything he had worked for. Then slowly he looked up, meeting Trevor's gaze with a new sense of resolve. The walls that had once separated them seemed to be crumbling, and in that moment, something unexpected happened. "I've always believed that change requires sacrifice," Elon said, his voice steady but not as combative. "But maybe, for the first time, I'm starting to understand that change also requires understanding. I've focused so much on the disruption, on the transformation, that I haven't thought about the consequences for those who are affected in ways I never imagined." Trevor smiled slightly, his tone warm but not mocking. "It's not about abandoning your vision, Elon. It's about making sure that vision includes everyone. It's about creating a future that doesn't leave people behind." There was a long pause. The tension in the room had evaporated, replaced by something else. Something deeper, more genuine. It was a realization not just for Elon, but for everyone who had been watching. For the first time in this interview, Trevor Noah and Elon Musk seemed to find common ground, not in their beliefs, but in their shared understanding of the responsibility that comes with power. The conversation had shifted from one of confrontation to one of introspection, and in that moment it wasn't about who had won the debate. It was about the realization that they both had something to learn from each other. As the interview came to a close, the crowd erupted into applause. The exchange had been intense, but it had also been enlightening. It was a rare moment where two very different people had laid bare their beliefs, their vulnerabilities, and ultimately, their understanding of the world. Trevor stood extending his hand toward Elon. "Well, Elon," he said with a smile, "I think we both learned a thing or two today." Elon hesitated for just a moment before standing to shake Trevor's hand. "I think you're right about that," he said quietly. And just like that, the interview ended, not with a fiery confrontation or a dramatic conclusion, but with the kind of mutual respect that only true dialogue can foster. The audience had witnessed something rare, a conversation that transcended the usual sound bites, a moment of real growth, of understanding, and of change.